In any kind of succession planning and generational planning, the one thing that you're always looking at is, well, is whatever I'm building now going to succeed me? And will it then provide for generations to come? And that's, for me, the underlying thing around transformation. So it isn't really about taking away from a certain sector and giving to another, but it's, what are we doing to ensure that this country continues to grow? What are we doing to ensure that we maintain talent in this country and it's not forced to go and look elsewhere for a livelihood? Now, if we can cover those things, it really just kind of then starts to permeate across different industries. And this is not specific to the asset management industry, but it's all industries at large. So what are we doing to, okay, first let's look at our situation. Are we interacting with each other? Are we developing each other's skills? Are we building environments and ecosystems where we can all grow and there's inclusive growth? And then from that, well, when I'm gone, what does that leave behind for my children and their children and so on? And that's largely the underlying thing here. So if you can localize it and deal with it within your fund, and that then permeates across other funds, the rest really will just take care of itself. If there are going to be huge drivers and mobilizers of this transformation, it should ultimately come from the retirement fund industry, and largely driven, I think, by your boards of trustees and consultants like ourselves in terms of driving that initiative forward. If I, as a trustee, am primarily concerned with alpha and generating positive returns, and not particularly concerned with where those positive and those strong returns come from, then naturally, the person that I am giving my money to manage will prioritize that. So often what we see in the industry is that there's a lot of kickback from trustees to service providers to say, well, you need to prioritize this thing. And I think we need to change that particular approach, in that we as asset owners need to dictate to these managers that we are hiring what our philosophy is on transformation. If my particular fund, Fund X, has a very strong view on whether I hold a specific asset or a specific instrument because of the impacts that it has on the economy or the environment at large, then the asset manager will largely say, well, I value you as a client, and also, well, you have sizable assets, so of course I will take you on and I will build a portfolio around that. If we as asset owners and trustees are not vocal on that particular aspect, then I think there'll be very less of a direct impact in how asset managers then carry it out, because they do it based on the instruction of us as asset owners. So I think it really does start with the boards of trustees, the custodians of the members' assets, in terms of how they take this thing forward. Built on the framework that we use when we advise our clients, let's look at broad-based Black economic empowerment, and let's look at the codes of good practice. So what is your asset manager doing in terms of skills development? What are they doing in terms of preferential procurement? If equity ownership is important to you as a client or a board of trustees, where do they sit in terms of the equity ownership, right? Then let's overlay that with the responsible investment aspect of it, right? So in putting their portfolios together, what kind of screening process do they apply to the underlying assets that they hold in their portfolios? Now, whether that's largely driven by us as the client and what we communicate in terms of what they'd like to do, or whether they have that ingrained in their own value system, is key. My opinion is such that if we are to get traction in terms of responsible investment, we as asset owners need to drive that initiative. The likelihood that it will come from asset managers is slim in my view, and I think it will be a lot slower in terms of getting traction, right? So we ourselves need to look at it as boards of trustees, have an opinion, have a stance on it, and share it with prospective asset managers. And then you'll find asset managers that are aligned. And then the societal impact of it. So what are they doing in terms of education, for argument's sake, housing, And you'll see that in the scores, the societal development doesn't have a necessarily high weighting. It's very much a niche offering. So you find asset managers that build solutions around that and do nothing else. And I guess it would prejudice most providers if that weighting towards that particular thing was high. So, it's not a section or a part of the codes that every asset manager will fulfill. But if you do find one, well, then that's advantageous to the fund.